Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Modern Mystic Soul podcast. I'm your host, Therese Tucker, and today we have a special guest joining us, a true luminary in the world of healing and transformation. Meet Jen Peters, a gifted multidimensional healer, author, teacher, and the visionary founder of a thriving self-healing community, which you can find on Instagram at Jen Peters underscore soul guide underscore healer. Jen's upcoming book, Coming Home, The Path to Healing Your Inner Child, is set to be released soon and is now available for pre-order. Jen is renowned for her expertise in dissolving emotional trauma and hidden blocks, guiding us towards alignment with our highest frequencies. And today she's here to explore the profound connection between inner child healing and our collective ascension journey. Get ready for a transformative conversation as we delve into the world of healing, growth, and wisdom that Jen Peters brings to the table. Jen, welcome to the Modern Mystic Soul podcast.
Wow, what an incredible introduction. Thank you so much. It's
You
just
are so
actually
welcome.
beautiful to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I was so excited to have you come on the show. I've been following you for years on Instagram. And I was telling you before we went live that your work on Instagram has quite an impact, I feel. And even just the snippets that you're putting out there are so powerful. I've really gotten quite a few ahas and just some inner awareness from the posts that you provide there. I mean, it really is amazing work. You're giving so much value for free. It's amazing.
Wow, thank you so much for that reflection. I really appreciate it. And ultimately, I'm here to serve. So through my posts, I like to share as much value and information as I can so that we've got the tools to get where we want to go. Because a lot of the time, people don't understand the background, or there might be just a one-liner that really lands with them, and is actually able to provide that activation that they've been looking for. So thank you for that beautiful reflection.
Absolutely. I would love to know what got you into this particular line of healing, because I feel like there's a lot of talk about inner child, but not anyone who's really guiding us into the depth and details that you're providing.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, so I guess I'll give you a little bit of an overview of my background. I mean, I was adopted, so I really coming into the world, I already had abandonment trauma, rejection trauma, low self-worth, unwanted, unloved, all of those things before I even started. Obviously, that was part of my plan, actually, because healing through those allows me to do what I do now. I see that now. But through childhood, I mean, I grew up in a home with a very volatile dad, and two adopted brothers. So it felt really unsafe for me, really, from literally from day one. As I went on, those inner child traumas started to play out differently in my life. By the time I got to my teens, I was really very off the rails. And by 15, I had had my first rape, 16 multiple gang rapes, by the same group of men.
My
Um, and so that was obviously that definitely left a mark, as you can imagine. By the time I was in my sort of late teens, I had just incredibly low self-worth. There was no guidance or support or anything for any of these things. You just muddle on and just kind of assume that everybody else kind of goes through this sort of stuff too. Um, And by the time I got to my 20s, I met what ended up being my husband, and we were together for about 14 years. And I was severely codependent, I was actually a hairdresser for a lot of years from 12, actually. I was working in a salon, and something I've noticed actually now being in the industry, so many of us are people pleasers. We overfunction, we over deliver. There's a lot of those codependent type patterns in that industry. And I was doing that sort of work until I was about 25, and I met my ex-husband at that time as well. And again, we were together for about 14 years. He was quite narcissistic. Obviously, most narcissistic people are undiagnosed, but I would say if there was a diagnosis, it would be that. Um, and I have to say, people who are narcissistic and people who are codependent, they really are two sides of the same coin. So, when we're attracting narcissistic type relationships, there's a very good chance that we carry codependent type patterning. And that was the case for me. So through those 14 years, there was a lot of infidelity, a lot of betrayal. I will say that I was betraying myself by staying. So the betrayal was not just on one side. Of course, I couldn't see that at the time. It was only through healing that I started to actually realize that. We ended up doing a lot of drugs. For me, I was high a lot of the time, particularly towards the last few years, because it was the only way I could cope with what was going on. And in the end, we separated, and I was just, honestly, I just felt like I was broken into a million pieces. If somebody if somebody had said to me, your name is not actually Jen, it's something else, I would not have been certain that my name was actually Jen. Like, I was so destabilized and so gaslit by that time. I really didn't know who I was. Now, a friend of mine strongly suggested that I see a healer. I didn't even know what a healer was at that point. So I ended up going and seeing her. I have to say, in true codependent fashion, I approached her trying to book a session for my husband because he was the problem. And yes, he was the problem, but also I had my stuff too. That's why I was tolerating it. And so she very wisely suggested that she sees me first, and she did. And I still remember that first session vividly. It absolutely changed my life. She took the rose tinted glasses off, and I went in there with them on. I went out with them off, and I was just like, oh my God, I am completely enabling all of this. This is not a blame thing or a victim shaming or anything like that, but it's just like, hang on, it's actually very empowering when we discover that, hang on a minute, I've got a part to play in this. That means I can change this. Um, and so that's what started me on my healing journey. I worked with her extensively, actually, for over 5 years. And during this time, that's when I started to obviously realize that, oh my gosh, I need to help others feel the way that I'm feeling. Like, they need to know this is possible, because the contrast of living in torment and then feeling actually peaceful, like it's like night and day. And so through that, obviously I started to discover that I was codependent, and I started to do more work on myself. I'd done 2 years training with a school in the US. And that's where I started to recognize that in order to step out of codependency, we must be able to dissolve the codependent patterns. And those codependent patterns are formed in childhood. And so that's where the inner child work was born. So I started off helping people around dissolving narcissistic abuse and codependency. But again, it always comes back to the inner child work. Like, nearly everything, not everything, but nearly everything comes back to beliefs that were formed in response to trauma in our childhood. And even if it happens when you're 20, you still dissolve it the same way anyway. So that's how I started really fine tuning and honing in on the inner child work, because that is just about always going to be the answer. And if you can get deep enough to the foundational level, dissolve it there, you dissolve all the patterns that you've been playing out on a day-to-day basis.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like so much of what you're saying is resonating. And I find it one so fascinating. Like as you're talking, I'm just thinking about like how we are designing our life path so that we will step into the person we're meant to be. And it's like everything that you're saying has built you into being this incredibly strong healer with such a like laser focus insight into the core issues that codependency has, or self-esteem issues. I mean, those are the ones, whenever you're talking about that, those resonate for me so hard because I
Mm,
recognize myself and my own lessons, my own like healing that I have to do in those posts. But what I love about hearing this is, I think that sometimes I think back to before I truly understood the work that we're here to do, that I always thought healers were these people who like had their, for lack of a better term, shit together. Like they came in with like they came in with it all together and that they had these answers. And it's like, no, I mean, through my own path and through paths like yours and listening, it's really we come in with this designed experience that is, I don't know why our souls like to choose such complicated work, but it's so necessary in order to really have the empathy, deep understanding, and deep wisdom to understand what it's going to take to move you from point A to point B. And your story is, I mean, that's quite profound to come into the world with the very things like at the right out the gate with the
yeah.
very pieces that you were going to need to overcome to get to this point. That's quite an intense but amazing journey.
Hmm.
And one of the things I've been noticing, especially, I would say it has intensified within the last 2 years, just from talking to my spirit team and the observations I've been making, is we are really being asked to deal with these inner child issues
Oh,
now. This is your last chance. It's kind of like, please,
yeah.
please,
Yeah.
please do it now. So I wanted to address that with you. And if you could explain to the audience listening the how inner child healing relates to the ascension process that we're currently in now. Why is it that my team and just everyone that I'm working with is having these core experiences come up where they have to get down to the heart of this, that it has to be cleared? Why can't we just take it with us into new earth and deal with it over there where it's going to be
Mm.
easier? Why before we go?
Mm. So thank you for sharing. And I agree with everything that you have said. So in my view, the inner child trauma, and this could be emotional trauma, it's any trauma, any kind of emotional trauma. When we talk
Mhm.
about inner child, we're just talking about it kind of occurring in those first few years. But it's any emotional trauma. So in terms of our ascension, there's two things. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that in our trauma, it absolutely holds so much wisdom. It holds, when we go in there, and I can feel my skin starting to tingle. When we go in there, we're, sometimes a little bit fearful of doing so. But I tell you what, not only do we gain insight, wisdom, but we also unlock knowingness and upgrades and up levelings that we could not get any other way.
Uh,
And so those up levelings are absolutely necessary for you to step into whatever you're here to do, right?
yeah.
So there is that side of it. And the other side is of course that trauma, so that helps us point in the direction of our mission, and it activates our mission to come online more. Also, as you probably know, trauma vibrationally, it's heavy. It's heavy, it's weighted down. It does not align with a higher frequency. It's as simple as that. And I'll tell you something about why it's coming out so much right now in a moment too. But we must clear the trauma in order for us to ascend. There is a lot. I don't see it so much now, but it might just be where I'm kind of hanging out. But there was a lot of bypassing going on for a long time about, positive thinking, high vibing, all that kind of stuff. It's all good stuff. It's part
Yeah.
of, it's one of the ingredients. but you have got to get to the core of the trauma and dissolve it at the foundation. Otherwise, it's like being weighed down by bricks, and you can positive think yourself as much as you like, but you're not going anywhere like that.
Yes. I fully feel that. And what my team has always shown me is like a hot air balloon with the sandbag still on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't go ascend
Correct.
with those airbags. They're the sandbags are holding you down. And I really, what you said about the trauma holding wisdom we couldn't get to any other way.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's a point I want to chew on in my own mind for a while and be like, yes, yes, like go deeper into that point. Um, wow. I mean, it's really, I think that's so beautiful. And then it just ties so much into this idea of creating a soul contract. Like, this is the way I'm going to get this, because again, from that bird's eye view, we can see how it's laid out. We can see the gateway, if you will, forward. And it's going to require us passing through this bit of understanding that our soul decided we needed to know this. This path is going to teach you something that is going to be profound to you, because I think a lot of times we can get weighed down on the fact that maybe we have trauma or we got stuck somewhere. Our ego does like to fixate on it and tell us how, especially if you have an ego that really loves to pick you apart, which I think a lot of people on the service to others path have that type of ego, where it's not about separating you through this grandiosity, but separating you through tearing you down. You're not enough.
Yeah.
Right. And your trauma is proof. And the fact that you've had this problem, number one, and two, that you're dealing with it for so long is proof that you're not enough and you're not going to make it. Right. That's what the ego is going to be saying.
Yeah. So that is what I would call a not enough wound.
Yeah.
It's a very common one. Know it well myself. That's why I recognize the signs. But yeah, that's exactly what it does. But there really is so much magic. Like when you were speaking, and I've been shown this before, it's almost like it's like a treasure hunt. Each of those triggers are of course connected to a trauma. And we might have multiple different triggers connected to one trauma. But each of those triggers, they are like a piece of treasure. Like you go into that and you will find gold there. And it's just like picking up those jewels and then moving on to the next one, the next one, the next one. And each time, you're expanding and expanding and expanding. It's a beautiful journey. And depending how you do it too, it doesn't have to be messy or uncomfortable. I know when I'm working with my one-to-one clients, there's always tears, but it's more out of compassion for what that part of you went through or is still going through. It's not because it's traumatic. And it's the most beautiful work to be able to actually really see yourself at that particular time, find out exactly what needed to be said, what they needed, and to give that to them. It's beautiful work. So it doesn't, again, a lot of people are afraid of it being messy. It doesn't need to be. And the other thing I wanted to say as well, we were talking before about the, high vibing and essentially bypassing a lot of the time, is I do see a lot in this community, and people can be quite ungrounded when we're
Yes.
avoiding what's going on in our body and what's gone on in our background. We can become quite ungrounded, and I get it, especially those of us who are starseed, come from the stars. It's a harsh reality down here. It's very jarring.
I love that you're saying that, because I absolutely recognize that within myself. In fact, I often ask of myself to be grounded, like to feel secure and be grounded and connect, because early in my life, I did not want to be in this body. I did not want to be here. I wanted to leave. I remember being about 4 years old and crying that I wanted to
Oh.
go home, but I was in my bedroom and my mom's like, and I'm just like, I want to go home. Like, I don't want to be here.
Oh.
And just that it took me a long time. In fact, I would say I really reconnected probably 2019, 2020, like when that whole thing happened. I went, okay, I'm in my body now, I'm here. and I'm anchoring in because there was this desire to sort of float above it all. Like I don't like what I'm experiencing. I
Yeah.
feel, and the inner child often feels helpless when experiencing that. That's one of the kind of core memories that comes up in me, is this helpless feeling like I can't stop this, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can't stop what's happening. I mean, I witnessed domestic abuse as a small child, and
Mm-hmm.
like you. And so there is this, I remember my first impulse was to scream and tell them to stop, make it stop. And then when no one was listening, I'm like, I can't stop this. Nothing I do helps, right? So this helplessness sort of kicks in. And that made me want to detach from the physical world so
Yeah.
much more. And then, of course, discovering, or remembering, I should say, like all that's happening in the non-physical I was very invested, very young in it, and it felt so good. But you're right, there is this sort of escape behavior going on with it. I mean, just like you can escape with anything, but you can also escape through spirituality, and through connecting with your angels, and you're talking to your guides, and you're trying not to be here, but the whole
Correct.
idea of incarnating here is to be here.
Exactly. And that is our job here, especially when we're from the higher realms.
Yeah.
Our job is to ground and anchor into the earth so that we can bring those higher codes into the earth. If we're
Right.
floating around up here somewhere, and been there, done that myself, plenty,
Yeah.
so it's no judgment or anything, then we can't do what we actually came here to do.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. And I find that it becomes a pattern too, where uh, one of the patterns I recognized in myself was just this weird feeling of helplessness anytime I'm challenged,
mhm.
right? The first thing that kind of comes up when you're not dealing with it is, I can't do this. And it's not founded in anything that's happening. It's just a pattern of belief that you're connecting with.
Yeah, and most likely from when you were a small child and you were powerless to do anything there. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And I would agree with you that I think the thing that helps it the most is actually having to face the challenge, actually having to sit in the frustration of your helplessness until you recognize your internal power and you start
Mm-hmm.
utilizing it, right? And
Yeah.
um so that's just one example of how I've kind of gone through that experience. But recently what I've just noticed is that um and it's not just me, but a lot of people I'm working with are talking about like these trigger core memories like popping up now. I feel like maybe it could be a combination of the energy field we're in now with the intensity of the energy that's coming through, or it's just time. It's time to deal with it, but I feel like they're just sprouting up to the surface. And when I look at the astrology, we've got so much Chiron energy activated that wounded healers is like, no, guys, it's on now. We're connecting Chiron with our North Node, which is where we're desiring to go. And both are together in Aries, which represents the self and like dealing with the self, right?
Mm. Yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. And the other thing that I've been seeing a lot of, I saw it kind of start maybe 2 years ago, but I've seen it kind of in full force, I have to say, since the 8/8 portal in 23. I don't know if you remember or not, but just leading into that, maybe the 2 weeks before that, and then from there on in, there was so much coming up for people, like way more than usual. Like
Yeah.
when you're in this position, you've got a decent sized audience, you tend to start to recognize the themes that are waving through the communities.
Yes.
I definitely saw that a lot. So what I've actually been seeing in my sessions, and I do remote healings as part of my programs, and that's when I can really see what's happening behind the scenes. We're changing over to crystalline. That's what's
Yeah.
happening. So there's some people I'm noticing their chakras are upgrading, not all at once. It's usually one or two at a time. But the point is they're upgrading, or their organs are, or their actual energy field is upgrading. But we're changing over to crystalline. So of course that is a fifth dimensional frequency. So
Mm-hmm.
anything that is sitting lower than that, I mean, there's probably a little bit of leeway there, but anything like that is of the third dimension, for example, like lower frequencies like grief, fear, anger, anything like that, it's going to be pushed out. So if your root chakra is changing over, I actually just worked with somebody yesterday, and his was in the middle of changing over. I could see the ruby red on the outside, but the inside was like literally like a closed flower. I see in great detail when I'm sort of working, closed flower, but it was platinum, and it just had the outer petal starting to open like a peony. It was
Ooh,
just like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. Love it. But that's what's happening. And so that's
yeah.
why so much is coming out. But I tell you what else is that in my experience, what I'm seeing is that any healing that we're doing, well, I mean, I'm only aware of my own healing, of course, but any healings that I'm doing or facilitating and supporting are very profound. They are far more, well, I mean, they were powerful before. They are far more powerful now. It's like everything's ramped up. So we're
Yes.
being super supported to heal, basically, right now. This is the time. If you haven't done it already, get onto it.
I wonder how anyone could avoid it. I feel like it's a
Well,
tidal wave. Like, how do you avoid? I feel like it's in your face now, and you're gonna. I don't know where you go in your life right now where you won't be confronted by the thing you need to heal. Well, that's how I'm feeling personally, anyway. I don't know if it's like that for everyone, but it's definitely like
Oh,
that for me.
I agree. And I mean, I've certainly found, I'm sure you have too, it starts off as a nudge, and then it's a tap, and then it's a
Yeah,
slap, and then it's just like a full on, I'm going to push you over. Like, if you're not going to listen, I'm going to make you listen.
that's
And
right.
that's kind of what happens. I can see a bit of a divergence really, though. There's going to be people, I certainly know people that are not going to look at anything at all. I think life's going to get really hard for them. It already is hard for them. Whereas when you start tapping into a higher frequency while you're doing your work, while you're grounded, I mean, the world is just an entirely different place.
There's some things in my own life where I'm like, I literally, there was the other day, I had some healing time with my mom, which was huge for me. And that morning I'd said to a friend, I need to let this go. I don't think this awareness between us is ever going to happen. And I have to be okay with that. And I was. And then I saw my team's number everywhere, which is 44. So everywhere I went, it was 44. I went and bought cat litter, $44. I'm like, what is
Uh,
going on? My team was just like so excited. And I'm like, I don't get it. So I'm driving over to my mom's house, and there's this huge rainbow in the sky. And I'm like,
oh,
okay. And then I'm driving, and there's the word karma on a sign just as I'm passing. I'm like,
wow.
what is it? So we get there, and the very thing that I said I was ready to let go of and I'm not going to get it. She was like, I talked to a medium who talked to your higher self, and your higher self said, this is what you need, which is exactly what it was. And she's like, so here. And I was just like, I was like, oh my God.
Was this just in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, this was last week.
I hear you. I've had the most, like, you cannot make this stuff up.
Yeah.
Synchronicities happen in
Yeah.
the last, well, 10 days, 2 weeks. Like
Yes.
bonkers,
Last
bonkers.
week started with such an intense awareness and pain. So much pain started at the beginning of the week. And then by Friday, it was like the exact opposite. I looked back and I'm like, hey, that was worth it. But if you talked to me last Monday, I would have been like, this shit is not worth it. I can't.
I'm going home. I
I
want
know,
my
right?
money back.
I'm out. So yeah, I just feel like there's so much getting our attention, which is why I'm so excited to have this conversation. So I want to switch and talk about your new book right now. I want to talk about coming home, and how it offers guidance to help with the inner child. You had mentioned about, I think you said there was like 12 types or archetypes, something. Could you just break that down for us? Because I know that there's there seems to be a lot more to inner child healing than a lot of us understand.
Yeah.
And you have a great way of sort of identifying it and helping get to like some core issues. So if you could share that with us.
Thank you. So I think one of the differences with my methods, my system, is that I go substantially deeper and a
Mm-hmm.
lot more detail than anyone that I'm aware of. There might be other people doing it, but I just know from the feedback from my clients who have inevitably always seen psychologists, therapists, other healers beforehand. So just gauging by that, I'm pretty sure that one of the key differences is the depth that we go to. So the detail. And so on that, I've discovered over the years, I've done around about 11,000 hours of actual inner child work in the subconscious mind. So a lot in that space. And I've consistently seen 12 themes of trauma coming up again and again and again and again. Now, there will be other types of trauma as well, but these are the 12 main themes. And so I break it down because I think one of the big issues from what I can, there's a few things, but one of the big issues with a more traditional approach or the more general approach is that we don't go deep enough. That is the problem. I'll also say in my experience, we have many multiples of inner children. We do not just have one. When we're just talking to one inner child and just throwing all these words at them, thinking that, or hoping to kind of hit the mark, it's just too general. It doesn't resonate. So we've got to actually split it down and go down a couple of levels. So with my work and the 12 themes that I talk about in my book Coming Home, there are themes such as emotional abandonment. Now, that's the most common trauma I see. Pretty much everybody I work with has some form of emotional abandonment. They might not have been abandoned, but if they've got a parent, often a mother, who has been disconnected for one reason or another, and it might be just because she's busy chasing two other toddlers, it can be very normal day-to-day stuff. That does cause often an emotional abandonment, and that rupture is what causes our attachment trauma. So really big, like big effects on us, but quite easy to happen. So I'll look at the emotional abandonment. I will look, and the book looks at attachment trauma, such as your anxious attachment, dismissive, avoidant, disorganized. We look at rejection, we look at low self-worth, we look at the not good enough wounds, feeling unloved or unlovable. We look at shame, boundaries, loneliness, chronic loneliness. That's a really big one too, which is actually different from abandonment and being alone. It's a slightly different feel to it. So we cover all of those different themes, and within the book, I look at what that particular trauma is, how it's formed, the sort of situations it comes about in. We also look at exactly what signs to look for in children, because the thing is, a lot of us are parents, and I want people to be able to go, oh my gosh, I can see that in my 4-year-old and know what to do now for their
Yes.
4-year-old rather than waiting till they're 34 and having to see a therapist.
Oh my God,
Um,
I love that.
yeah, I've got lots of anecdotes all the way through there for parents. Well, just because if we can catch it at that age, that's going to be so much better for everybody.
Huge. That is going to be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like my prayer for people, is that they can catch it early, because imagine a world of healthy adults,
Oh
what
my
that would
gosh.
look like.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I even speak about in there, just to your point around dissociation, because I think that a large portion of the collective are actually dissociated. And so, of course, with babies, this happens when they feel like they're not safe in their body. And so this is what you look for. This is what you do, massage your baby's feet and their body and da da da. So I've got that stuff in there because that's
Love that.
where ADHD half the time comes from.
Really?
Well,
Re-
yeah, because they're dissociated. So
Wow.
I've not come across a single person with ADHD who has not experienced quite extreme trauma, and that trauma is unresolved. So their energy is out of their body. And so it either goes into freeze mode, and that's where they're very vacant, like a
Yeah.
deer stuck in the headlights, or think of your child bouncing off the walls. It's because they're out of their body and they don't feel safe. In fact, I write about that quite a bit, and well, not quite a bit, but I definitely explain that in there, because a lot of the times these kids are getting into trouble at school for mucking around or whatever they're doing. It's just like, hang on a minute, the teacher needs to actually help this child feel safe in their body and safe in the classroom. So calling on them and singling them out in front of 30 other kids is not helpful.
Yeah.
Whereas if the teacher understands why that child is bouncing off the walls, then they're able to provide a safer environment so the child can come back into their body and then they can learn, because when we're out of our body, we can't think. Our mind goes to mush. We cannot process even simple information. And
Right.
so that's where these kids are at. So they're not problem children. They're carrying trauma. That's the problem.
Wow.
Yeah. So I want people to understand that. And I don't understand why this is not being talked about more, to be quite honest.
I'm really looking forward to this book then, because as a mother myself, that's constantly what I'm thinking about, is like, how do I know, as somebody who's had trauma in their life and is actively trying to heal it, it's not always easy to catch it
Mm-hmm.
in another, especially if you're distracted by your own trauma and you're trying to heal. And I'm just
Well,
thinking,
you're in
God,
it.
how long does this go on? Like, are you going to be going to therapy for the things that I couldn't catch? But I absolutely love that not only is this book going to help someone going through it personally, but it can also arm them with tools to help somebody else, because I can think of several people as you're talking who I'm like, that awareness of a person with ADHD is leaving their body. And I'm thinking about my husband, who I love deeply. And I'm like, how can I bring him back into his, like, should I massage him? Like, what do you do to help someone get back
Well,
into their body?
there happens to be a process for
Oh,
exactly that in the
I love,
book, because
I love,
because I've got a process. I've got processes for each of the themes of trauma as well. So you learn everything about it, and then you can follow the step-by-step process to actually start healing it. And I do have one specifically for dissociation for that reason, because as I say, a large proportion of us are dissociated and we don't even know.
yeah, no, that is incredible. Take my money. I will have my book, just because
Oh, all right
what
then.
a gift. What a gift. No, seriously. Okay. Uh, that's amazing. And gosh, you are so good at this that you're literally intuiting my questions before I can ask
Oh,
them. So,
thank you.
okay, let's talk about then, so we've got dissociative was one that I could identify. You talked about emotional abandonment. Um, what are a few others that show up for us?
So the not good enough trauma is very common. That's when if we tend to overfunction, we have the needs to prove ourselves. We compare ourselves to others, and of course, always see ourselves as less. That is a not good enough trauma. Like we feel like, oh, nothing I ever do is enough. I'm never
Yes.
good enough, always falling short. We will most likely have had a parent who's quite critical of us, even if they did it in a loving kind of way. That will cause us, and of course, anyone who's had a narcissistic parent will have that as well. Low self-worth, that's more around settling for less, feeling like we can't ask for more, and we're
Uh-huh.
inclined to settle for the crumbs when we have low self-worth, and we'll generally attract partners and friends actually who have similar traumas. So it quite often exacerbates our feeling of low self-worth. We won't put ourselves out there, or we won't go for that job promotion, or we feel like we're worth X amount of money and a salary increase, but we'll actually settle for a lot less. So that's a low self-worth trauma. And I've also got around rejection in there, because that's kind of very deep, very much related to the emotional abandonment. The rejection is almost like a trauma response to the original emotional abandonment. Um, and as I mentioned before, we've got processes around shame. We've got quite a lot around self-abandonment too, because obviously, and a bit in there around codependency, because I know a lot of people in our community can relate to codependent type patterning. And yeah, there's a lot in there around the unloved, and also around boundaries, how to speak up, how to set boundaries, examples to setting boundaries, what they can look like, tips to how to do it.
I
Mm.
want to kind of go back to the low self-worth piece, because one of the things that my team has had me talk about is martyrdom.
Oh,
And martyrdom, my team has explained it that they see narcissism and martyrdom as two sides of the same coin, like two faces, in terms of the fact that they both are separating from oneness, but through different means. Meaning, like, the narcissist thinks they're better than, they're superior, and so they're separating through their superiority, with where a martyr would separate from oneness through inferiority
Yeah.
and believing it's less than, right?
Yeah.
So does that resonate for you, or do you see, is martyrdom slightly different than low self-worth?
I would say they would go hand in hand, but in the example you've just given, you've kind of equated a martyrdom to codependency. Is that right?
Uh, okay, let me see how I would define martyrdom. So I see it as, because a lot of times I'm talking to people, we're talking about being on the path of service to others, but my team is adamant that I make sure that people understand that service to others includes you. You need to put yourself inside the circle of who you're serving, so that every single
Gotcha.
person, you included, is their needs are being met, right?
Yeah.
And so when I talk about martyrdom, I see it as a person who is intentionally separating themselves from so my needs are nothing. I am nothing. I'm just here for you. I don't have any needs.
Complete self-abandonment.
Okay.
Complete self-abandonment is happening there. And we do see that a lot. And that goes hand in hand with overgiving, caretaking, fixing, saving. Those are all codependent patterns. For me, codependency is like the term codependency is an umbrella term
Okay.
for a whole lot of different themes underneath, like overgiving, overdoing, overfunctioning, people pleasing, not saying no, saving, rescuing, fixing, all of those kinds of things, which is kind of what you're talking about. But the curious thing is, as well, we actually need to bring that imbalance. We need to be, as you said, giving ourselves as much as we're giving other people as well, because otherwise we really are pouring from an empty cup and from a
Yes.
place of lack. And I've got to be honest, a lot of times it's definitely worth looking in to see what's really driving this, because most of the time, especially when it comes to codependent patterning, we will be overgiving or really nice or people pleasing because we're seeking something, because we're
Yes.
wanting to be seen, or we're
So,
wanting to be accepted or acknowledged, or we're abandoning ourselves so that we get chosen and we get that security that we're looking for.
right. So it's more transactional relationship than a pure place of giving, is what I'm hearing.
It definitely can be. I wouldn't want to say it always is, but it definitely can be. And I know that might be a little bit triggering to some, but I think, to be honest, anything that we're actually really quite triggered about, we probably know that there's something sitting in there for us.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I remember, sorry.
no, I want to hear what you have to say. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember years ago hearing Teal Swan describe codependency as actually covert narcissism. And at the time I was like, oh, like that was so insulting and offensive and all of those things. Like that really ripped my nightie, which always tells you there's something going on there, isn't there? And the further I've gotten along to this path, it's like, I can actually see what she's saying. It's not that we're talking about bad people here, but usually we're doing these things for a particular reason. It's really not unconditional. We're doing it because we want a particular outcome. We're not giving from a place of pure, just want to give. We want to
Right.
get something back in return.
Right. Well, these are coping mechanisms ultimately. I mean, we learned
That's
them,
right.
right?
That's how we survived.
We all tried to start from that pure place, and then when it didn't work, we adapted or adjusted our approaches until we found something that started working, and that's what we used, but didn't realize that it was a coping mechanism.
That's exactly right. And it's not a shaming thing at all. And I've been there myself as well. And it is, as you say, it's a coping mechanism. That is how we learnt to survive.
Yeah,
That's, how we survived the environment we were born into.
absolutely. So now I love that you brought up that codependency is sort of an umbrella term for all these other behaviors, because when you had mentioned that the codependent and the narcissist go hand in hand, I was thinking to myself, I thought it was the empath and the narcissist that go hand in hand, but I realized that maybe sometimes we use the term empath as almost like the sugarcoating positive, toxic positivity version of codependency. Share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely I I hear what you're saying, and there's definitely a lot of merit to what you're saying. I know for me though, I wouldn't want to say that every empath is codependent, but I will say that empaths definitely the area they need to really work on is boundaries. Energetic boundaries, as well as boundaries keeping people out, as well, and in particular around boundaries that stop them from overgiving, overfunctioning, overextending, and so on. So
Yes.
boundaries, 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 and that's where empaths and codependency really overlap. Is it's a complete and utter lack of boundaries. And it's not, again, there's two sets of boundaries. It's not just boundaries to keep people out. It is also boundaries in particular for us, if we tend to be empathic or codependent or self-abandoned. It is about boundaries that stop us from doing that, recognizing when we're, offering to do stuff when we don't have time to do that stuff, but we're doing it because we think we need to be nice, or that's what we should do, or so on. So it's putting those boundaries in for ourselves.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting with that narcissism and the empaths. I mean, I don't hear it so much anymore, but it may still be around. A lot of people will say that they're attracting narcissists because they're empaths. It's like, no, no, no. You're attracting narcissists because of the unhealed trauma that you're carrying. There's no shame in that. We all have it. Anyone who
Right.
thinks they don't have trauma, they probably are carrying more than the average.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
well, I mean, we all
You
have
have to
it.
really disassociate to believe that they don't, right? I mean, you really have
Well,
to like kind
yeah.
of,
Yeah, so it was bypassing once again.
right,
We all have it. I mean, I have never met anybody in any walk of life that you can't start recognizing the patterns and
right.
pretty quickly, So um but yeah, they'll often think that, okay, I'm attracting narcissists because I'm empathic, and I'm a really nice person. And it's like, you probably are empathic and are a really nice person, but the real reason why you're attracting narcissists is because you don't have boundaries in place, solid boundaries.
Yeah.
And also, you will have the same sorts of traumas that the narcissist has, except they play out differently. So you'll have an abandonment trauma. That's why you abandon yourself. Whereas a narcissist will, they've completely cut their entire self off and created a new persona, but they will have you self-abandon so that they don't feel abandoned. They will have the not good enough trauma. For them, they'll become grandiose, big, or and they will tend to encourage you to your not good enough trauma will play out by proving yourself and standing on your head to make them happy, overextending, overfunctioning, so on. They might have a low self-worth. For them, they will actually try to pump their worthiness up by depleting yours. So they're the same traumas, they just play out usually in the polar opposites.
Interesting. Yeah. I've been talking with some people about narcissist, and it's not an area that I've really dug into before this year. And as I went down the rabbit hole, there's quite a bit to learn about how that whole dynamic works. And I guess I'm going to ask this for a friend. This question. She's going through a divorce with a narcissist, a pretty nasty one. And of course, it's kind of like when you're in that, it's kind of like, when you get a certain type of car and you've never driven it before, suddenly you see it everywhere. Well, it's like when now she's in this situation, she sees it everywhere. Like so many other friends are like, oh yeah, I'm divorcing this narcissist, and the stories are very similar. And so the question that she would ask if she was here is, why are there so many narcissists out there? Like, is it would you say there's an unnatural amount of them, or is it just that our traumas are going to lead us sort of down a certain path, and some of us go this way and some go the other way, and it's just sort of like 50-50 ish.
It's quite a complex question actually. If you've had a history of being with narcissistic people, like you've had a couple of partners that are narcissistic, then it's highly likely that you have codependent type patterning, like the self-abandoning type patterning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's most likely that you've been raised in an environment that probably had a narcissistic parent in it. Therefore, the opposite's kind of like an anxious attacher will most likely be with somebody who's avoidant. It's the same kind of pairing. You know, a narcissist will often be with a codependent or a degree of that.
Yeah.
So they will have picked up that patterning. So bottom line is, if you have been with more than, I would say, more than one narcissist, and attracted more than one narcissist, then it's highly likely you have codependent type patterning. And so you are a vibrational match to narcissists. So you are going to seek them, you're going without unconsciously seek them, but vibrationally you're going to be magnetizing that sort of trauma in. So the way to step out of that is not doing what many people do, become a walking encyclopedia about everything there is to know about narcissism. That is bypassing one to gain. I mean, you do need to know the information, and it's good information to have. But while you're still carrying that patterning, you're still a magnet to them. So you've got to go in and do the inner child work to dissolve those patterns, dissolving the part of you that wants to people please, dissolving the part of you who feels like they have to prioritize other people's needs above their own. Just all of that, the one that has to keep the peace. So dissolving those aspects, bringing them into balance, actually heals those traumas, and you no longer vibrate in that way. So you no longer attract those people to you. And if you did, you spot it a mile off, and you can easily step out of it. You don't
Start to
become
smell them. You're like, yeah.
exactly. It's like, I
No,
see
thank
that.
you. I will.
Yes, move along. That energy is not for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point. And okay, so I'm so excited for this book to come out. By the way, when does Coming Home Work come out?
So I am launching 25th of March. Originally we were looking at February, but there's actually a lot to do. So we wanted to be a little bit more spacious. So we're going to launch on the 25th of March. And print version will be in May. So really excited about it, because ultimately, this may be of interest to your people actually. It was actually Yeshua that came to me New Year's Day of 23, 7 o'clock in the morning, first thing in the morning. And he was different to usual, like very no nonsense. Not that he's, overly playful normally, but he was very serious, like this has to be done. And I channeled about 5 pages from him. And he was the one who instructed me that this book needed to be written. And yeah, so he's actually channeled codes into this book as well. So it is very activating, but ultimately I want people to have effective tools that they can afford, that can actually help them heal at the foundation instead of just scratching the surface, like what is often the case. They will have the tools and they can take those tools forward with them too.
Fantastic. And so it will be available on Amazon first
Yes. Yeah.
in March. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So put it in your browser on Amazon, Coming Home. You want to find this book. Before we go though, I wanted to know if, okay, let's say we're listening to I'm a listener and I'm listening to this. I'm like, this is fantastic and I need to get my hands on it, but I'm also in pain right now. What is something like a starter exercise for someone who's like, I really do want to make contact with, even if I don't know the aspect of my inner child that's active, I just want to make contact and initiate the healing process. I'm ready to embody myself and I'm ready to face this. And how can I start now until I can get my hands on your book?
Thank you. So I would possibly create some quiet space where you're not going to be interrupted. Perhaps sit there and as you're thinking about the thing that is troubling you. Notice whereabouts in your body you're feeling the emotional charge. Might be your chest or your solar plexus or your belly, but wherever it's sitting, and just notice what are the physical sensations. Then notice what are the emotions, what emotions and words are sitting in that part of your body. And then reflect those words and emotions back. You know, for example, you might be feeling anxious and sad and fearful of what's to come, for example. You would say, I know that you're feeling anxious and sad and fearful for what's to come, but I want you to know that I'm here with you now. You're not on your own. I'm here and you're going to be okay, or whatever reassurance that you specifically need. The key here is noticing the exact emotions or words that are in there. They can be anything, but reflecting those exact words back. So you want to, and I just saw an orb just go poof when I said that. Yeah, it's about actually the exact words, not paraphrasing, and reflecting those back. And that helps you feel seen, heard, understood, soothed. And then I always like to bring in violet light, and then anything else that's light. I'll quite often use rainbow or golden light or soft pink, whatever you feel called to. As long as it's light in color, you're not going to go wrong.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I know that for me, when I really got clear for myself a few years ago about the self-abandonment, I make a point when I get that wobbly feeling inside where I start to feel really scared or like I can't do this, is I literally say to myself, I have your back. I'm right here. I am right behind you. I am not going anywhere. I am right here. And that has made
Mm,
such a small but
mm,
powerful difference in my
mm,
own healing, is like really
mm,
reaffirming that I'm here.
mm.
I'm not
You,
going anywhere.
you know what would be amazing would be going back to, even just as a future self, going back to that little girl. I want to say 3-year-old. I can't remember if you mentioned that age or not, but the little young version of you, and taking her out of there and just letting her know that she is okay, and just doing it from a future self perspective.
That happened 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks
Oh,
ago,
I
I
love
got
it.
triggered. I was listening to something that, fortunately, even though I did not like listening to it, it immediately put me back in that 4-year-old body. I'm at my door and pressing on it and screaming and crying. And I Therese, now walked into the room. I grabbed her hand and I said, "You're coming with me." And I opened a portal. I took her through. We went to the night
Oh,
garden, which is a very special place. And she has a little playhouse there with a bedroom and all of her kitties, and I sat with her and held her. And I'm like, you don't have to be there anymore. You get to be here. And that moment,
beautiful.
yeah. I mean, even talking about it, I get teary, but it was
Yeah.
very it is a really powerful visualization to show up
Mhm.
for yourself in that way that you so wanted an
Mhm.
adult to show up for you at
Yeah.
that time. And I just, you know, we know that time is not linear, it's cyclical and it's happening now. And so when we do that, we are sort of changing
We
the
are.
trajectory of our own
Yeah.
life by going back in time and healing something that needed it in that moment. We
Yeah.
get to do that, and we will see a ripple effect in our
We
life.
do. You're exactly right. I love that you did that. And that's exactly what I see too when I do this. I know I've done work with other clients over the years, and we've done, for example, healing work around sexual abuse. And it's very interesting. Oftentimes, when we go back to that particular time, we will resolve what's going on there, heal the inner child. We'll also deal with the perpetrator usually as well. So that empowers them. But it's really interesting. By the end of the process, they'll go, you know what? I think that was the last time it ever happened. Like, doesn't surprise me at all, because we've gone back and we've put a stop to it. That's why.
Yeah.
Pretty
Oh my
incredible,
gosh.
eh? Talk about
Yeah.
quantum.
I love going quantum. I love that. So, how can people best connect with you now? Because I know that once they listen to this, they're going to want to hear more from you, get more insights, get a chance to work with you. So, how can they do that?
Oh, thank you. So probably the main place, honestly, right now is through Instagram. That's where I'm most active there every day. You can DM through Instagram or through my website, which is www.jen-peters.com. But I do have digital Heal Your Inner Child courses. I do the one-on-one containers, which are obviously we tailor specifically for you. And I'm about to actually open group coaching because I want people to know how to heal, not just to heal, but to actually have the tools so they can heal themselves going forward too. So it's really about empowering others to be able to do this work on their own.
That is so fantastic. I strongly recommend, I strongly recommend following her at least on Instagram because you
Oh,
get so much value out of the content that she's sharing. And she really does give you ideas on how to deal with the issues, and it's all right there at your fingertips. So it's so valuable. And any healing coaching work that she's doing, jump in on that because I know that it's probably going to fill up fast. Because the work that you're doing is so needed and necessary at this time. And it really is like weights being lifted off of you doing this kind of work. So no matter how intense it may feel to face it, it is the only way to heal it is through. And Jen is such a great
absolutely.
guide through this. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I mean, we're actually working with our multidimensional selves as well. We're using multidimensional tools, and it's actually your higher self, your multidimensional self, that is actually helping guide and facilitate the healings as well. So we're well supported in that space.
yay. I love that. Well, thank you
Beautiful.
so much for coming on to the podcast. It has been so eye-opening, and I could just talk to you forever about this, everything that you're saying. I'm just like, yes, yes, more. I love
Oh,
it.
thank you. That was
Absolutely.
amazing. Thank you so, so much. I've absolutely loved our conversation too, and I love what you're doing. Thank you for doing what you do and opening this space for us because it's also very needed. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, you are so welcome. It's a pleasure to do this. So be sure to look for Jen Peters' book, Coming Home. It will be available soon on Amazon in March, and
Yep.
then there's also going to be a hard copy. I am a big fan of hard copy, so that you
Me
have that as an
too.
index. But I will get it on Kindle just to have it. But I definitely look forward to that hard copy coming out in May. So be sure to take a look. I will put links to Jen in my show notes so that you can go right to her account, start following now, check out her website, jen-peters.com. And until next time, I hope that this episode finds you happy, healthy, and blessed. And I will be seeing you soon. Bye, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.